SEGA.
Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took a seemingly floundering game franchise, made the best game in said franchise in 18 years, and put it on the best-selling video game platform at the time? Nothing, it seems. The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has been in dire straits critically for some time now, and you'll probably hear me say this every review I do in the franchise, but every time I see people talking about the more recent games, one in particular is hardly ever mentioned. That game is, of course, Sonic Colors. Released for the super popular Nintendo Wii in 2010, you'd think Sonic Colors would be a smash hit. It was. So if that's the case, why do I never really hear people talk about the game? Is it because it was just as quote-unquote bad as the other 3D Sonic games? Or did it shine too bright for it to actually mean anything in the Sonic is bad conversation? Let's do it to it and find out. Like most other Sonic games, Sonic Colors is very light on story. In fact, you can say this one is the lightest on story out of all the non-spin-off 3D Sonic games ever released, even lighter than Sonic Generations, the birthday game, which was released a year later. Dr. Eggman constructed a giant amusement park in space and kidnapped entire planets to serve as grounds for his attractions, somehow without anyone noticing. Naturally, Sonic and Tails stumble upon it, and it's up to them to stop him from doing whatever it is that he's actually doing. Okay, so it isn't the most well-constructed story out there. It literally exists for the sole purpose of having Sonic in space with an amusement park setting. Despite this, the tighter focus and inclusion of only Sonic, Tails, Eggman, and his two strange robot companions means the story doesn't get too cringy and doesn't overstay its welcome. It exists, and that is really all you can say about it, other than the fact that it's still a little cringy.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Nothing but perfection here. The gameplay in Sonic Colors isn't that different from the game that came before it, Sonic Unleashed. Now this may have some of you reeling back in abject terror, as Sonic Unleashed is notoriously vilified in Sonic fanbase, but I am here to ease your fears. Sonic Colors takes one thing from Sonic Unleashed, the good part of the game, which is the boosting daytime stages, and transforms them into a proper game. Now what I mean by this is that it's less interactive cutscene and more skill-based. Gameplay is broken up into various styles, and the stages swap between them seamlessly with little to no control fumbles along the way. The most well-known of said styles is the behind-the-back boost style. Here, Sonic is running away from the camera and you guide him by following the track and using your boost to zip along it as fast as you can. Here you can boost, jump, and slide, and all are used to traverse the environment or avoid obstacles. This is the primary form of gameplay from Sonic Unleashed, and that might worry some people as the gameplay in Sonic Unleashed is often considered automatic. This is still best described as a spectacle of the gameplay styles that is very guided and focuses more on reaction and memorization of the stage than outright skill, meaning the more you play it and the more you learn the level, the more flawlessly you can perform. But it is less automatic than the version Unleashed due to one slight change. This change is how you fill your boost gauge. In Sonic Unleashed, gathering rings is enough to fill your gauge, meaning that if you are on a long runway of rings, you are never going to have to stop. Here, the gauge is only filled either by killing certain enemies or by collecting specific Wisp canisters. This means you won't be zipping along constantly and will be going at a brisk speed of sound instead of Sonic Unleashed's regular speed of light. What this means for boost style is that the developers were actually able to build levels instead of showcases, and the level design in general benefits from it. This is still the more automatic form of the gameplay, but you never had more interaction with this style than here. The second of the two major gameplay styles is the side-scrolling style. This style was present in Sonic Unleashed, but it wasn't very common, and it was typically delegated to entire stages. Here in Colors, the stages transition between styles seamlessly more often, meaning you'll be journeying to Sonic's stomping grounds of 2D more than ever. This is where the meat of the platforming takes place, and it's nice to see it back at the forefront of a modern Sonic game. The level design in the 2D sections is fun and has more depth than the boost style sections, and the controls feel great, despite a little slidiness. You can also boost in the style, and it's recommended in some sections, but most of the time, you'll be plodding along at a regular speed and doing precise platforming, which is never a bad thing. Outside of those two major styles, you have auto-scrolling 2D sections and snapping sections. The auto-scrolling stages are easy to explain, as it's 2D sections that are screen-scrolling and you just need to keep up with the edges of the screen while avoiding obstacles. As for the snapping sections, they're boost-style sections where movement is locked to sidestepping, or snapping as I'm referring to it here, to the left or right. These sections are incredibly limited and are just for dodging pits, walls, or enemies while the timing gets tighter and tighter. These two styles are by far the least used, which is a good thing as these are the only underdeveloped or bad styles of play. Thankfully, most of the sections they are used for are bearable and not too difficult, making them a non-issue. Outside of basic Sonic stuff, Colors introduces a new power-up gimmick because what would a 3D platformer be without its gimmicks? These power-ups come in the form of alien life forms known as Wisps, and they are trapped in containers all over Eggman's amusement park. They exist in various colors: blue, green, orange, other blue, pink, and purple, and they all do different things. When Sonic has one of these Wisps collected, a press of the R button, assuming you're using the classic controller like, any decent human being, will activate the power. At first, each level is seemingly built for certain powers, and seeing as each world unlocks a power, that would make sense. But as you play, you learn that some levels can have different ways to progress depending on which Wisp you pick. Picking the blue laser Wisp can take you on a different path than the orange drilling Wisp, for example. This means that the levels are more complex, but, in my opinion, needlessly so, much like the older 2D Sonic games on the Genesis/Mega Drive. Some are also just more specific than others, such as the other orange Rocket Wisp and the green Hover Wisp, and only really help or even appear in specific stages, making them even more of a fluff piece. Thankfully, if you don't want to participate in this wispiness business, you can make it to the end goal with the two legs Yuji Naka gave you, so they are generally a needless gameplay flair meant to spice up gameplay rather than completely change it. Outside of Wisps, Sonic can collect two different kinds of rings, the traditional gold ones and red ones. The gold ones very unsurprisingly act as your health, and the red ones act as a stage's collectibles. There are a handful in each stage, and they do unlock something for collecting them, bonus levels. They unlock bonus stages that you can actually play in multiplayer and also lead to another staple unlock in the Sonic series. I personally never bothered with them, as they are very good at getting you killed, and some are extremely easy to miss, but if you want the full Sonic experience, they're there, and are both easy and tricky to find. Outside of that, there isn't much to it. The game is broken up into a sort of Super Mario World style map select screen with worlds. Each world has 6 stages and a boss, and each stage has red rings to collect as well as a S rank to pursue. Worlds can be tackled in sort of a non-linear order, meaning if something is too difficult for you, you can usually tackle something else instead. Thankfully, or not, depending on your preference, this is probably the easiest of the Boostilogy, and was more of a pleasant experience to get through rather than a brutal uphill battle Unleashed tended to be, while still holding some challenge. Personally, this was a plus. may or may not exactly be able to tell due to this being recorded with my Wii disc on a Wii U and not some gussied up HD emulator, but Sonic Colors is a major flex for the Wii hardware. The Boost Sonic games can be described as a spectacle platformer if you wanted, due to how cinematic they tend to be, and nothing actually lives up to that quite like Sonic Forces. The different planets that Eggman captured for his dumb amusement park are gorgeous and almost completely hide the fact that this is a Wii game running on sub-HD capable hardware. The art design is fantastic and the pure beauty of the game is astounding considering the game loads damn near instantly and runs at a rock solid frame rate. Despite running at only 30 frames a second, there are very few instances of slowdown, and these tend to occur during sections where you have no control, so gameplay is not affected. For the Wii, which has technical blunders like the Alone in the Dark port or the various early Call of Duty ports, this is a technical tour de force and a major feather in Sega's Wii efforts. Hell, I'd say this even gives Nintendo a run for their money on their own platform. It's marvelous to witness. Moving from sights to sounds, the music is also incredibly on point. Sonic always tends to have greatest music, even in its darkest hours, so this isn't completely surprising, but it is a pleasant thing to hear. From turning the game on and being greeted with Reach for the Stars, to entering a level and hearing that world's music, what's on offer here is great. Shame there isn't more of it. From what I gather, each world only has one track, with some variation sometimes, but that one track tends to be great. Combine this with the regular broadcast from Eggman over the intercom like an actual amusement park, and you have quite a well-realized setting that just oozes charm and quality. The other half of the audio isn't quite as well done, being the voice work, but it gets the job done. This is the first mainline Sonic game to use the new voice cast, so coming from Unleashed to this can be a bit jarring, but characters do sound like you'd think they should. Roger Craig Smith plays a really cocky Sonic well, delivering the cringe we expect, and Eggman sounds as great as ever, but that's expected. While everyone else was recast, his voice actor, Mike Pollock, reprised his role. Overall, the voice work is good, but it's not amazing. Better than the 4Kids cast overall, but we have gotten used to them at this point, so it can be very jarring going to this. While I heap on the praise awfully hard, the game does have its flaws. One small flaw is that it's still using the life system despite it not really doing much. Sure, running out of lives will send you back to the start of a level rather than your last checkpoint, but all it does is make the frustrating sections you are probably losing your lives on more frustrating instead of less. If you get a high enough rank in a stage, it might give you a life, and if you jump and hit the score or rank enough in the level complete screen, you'll break them, potentially revealing another life, but it doesn't amount to much. The game also suffers from the sin of trial and error gameplay. Some stages you don't get a lot of warning about what's coming up. Now, in another platformer you get enough time to register what is happening and react to it or not. Here you might get a fraction of a second to react before death. Thankfully, these aren't as common as they are in other Sonic games, but they are still here. The game also does another video game sin of reusing bosses. The Sonic franchise has never really been known for its good bosses, I don't think, and Colors didn't change that. The bosses are faceless robots, and two of them are even each fought twice. They weren't exciting the first time you fought them, so they weren't going to be interesting the second time either. The final little flaw I feel is worth mentioning is the final boss. Now, judging from all the Sonic games I played, this should have been a given, but the final boss in Colors was still a boring, tedious slog instead of being fun. Now, it's not as bad as the final boss in both Unleashed and Generations were, but it's bafflingly hilarious that Sonic can never get final boss battles right. Those flaws, combined with my dislike of the unnecessarily overcomplicated stages, means the game isn't perfect, but I don't feel they detract from the game too much, especially since the level design is still fun. So, why was this game left on the Wii until just recently? Coming on the end of the 7th generation, many Wii games were getting ports to the HD consoles to capitalize on them reaching their peaks. Many were brought over, but none of the ones that truly deserve to be ported over have actually made it, Sonic Colors being one of them, until now. While the cons list may look a bit long, I feel they are mostly minor enough that they don't ruin the game, as the pros are so strong that they override them. To many, this may seem controversial, but in my opinion, this is the best 3D Sonic game ever made, and it is a shame that it was left in the dusty Wii's library, debatably even still considering how rough that HD port was. To those that haven't played it and are wondering what a good Sonic game looks like after Forces, give it a shot. To any who are still out there playing their Wiis like I am, give it a shot. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and I invite you to reach for the stars. I am going to award Sonic Colors a mighty 8 out of 10. I'll still recommend it, even now. It may only be 10 years old or so, but it aged very well.
Ah, not nearly enough aliens!
Want us to get more?
No, I want you to get me a cheeseburger and a shake!
That'll be easier. Cheeseburgers don't run as fast as them little alien varmints.
Idiot! Get me more aliens!